With Jayden Daniels out in week 8, the Washington Commanders are going to turn to Marcus Mariota and a pared down defense to find a way and stop arguably the NFL's hottest team. That and more right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders. I'm David Harrison, your guy on the ground, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, right here with you 5 days a week. And you can also find me writing about the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. And you can follow me on X at DHarrison82. I want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or view of the day. To the everydayers, those of you who come through for every single episode, a special thank you goes out for you making it through for another one. Coming up on today's episode, we're going to explore some insight into Kansas City Chiefs defensive lineman Chris Jones. And then we're going to examine what simplifying the defense really means. But first, Marcus Mariota has to be able to handle the Kansas City Chiefs pressure in order to help elevate his team to a critical Week 8 win. All of that is coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And it's all brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers, you bet just $5. And if that bet wins, you'll win $300 in bonus bets to use anywhere across the app. So the Washington Commanders, Marcus Mariota getting his third start of the season, fourth game appearance of the year, counting the relief effort that he put in and for the majority of the second half against the Dallas Cowboys last week after Jayden Daniels suffered the hamstring injury that took him out of that game and is going to hold him out for at least this game, if not more. But that's also to be seen as far as whether or not Jayden will be available next Sunday night against the Seattle Seahawks. So he is going to be obviously the key player to this entire effort for the Washington Commanders. So at least for the offense. Quarterback being the most important position on the field, Marcus Mariota coming in. And the good news here is that there have been really good performances from the Washington Commanders offense under Marcus Mariota, even in the loss to the Atlanta Falcons. Not certainly Marcus Mariota's greatest day and certainly not one he's going to want to put on his career highlight tape. But when you look at the numbers and you go back and watch the performance, it wasn't, this overall terrible performance that just took the Washington Commanders out of the opportunity to potentially win that game. So Cliff Kingsbury saying, quote unquote, nothing much will change with Marcus Mariota in there versus Jayden Daniels. But the more specific part of it comes to just kind of catering to what Marcus Mariota likes to do compared to Jayden Daniels. You know what I mean? Every quarterback has their preference. Every quarterback has their favorite plays, things like that in certain situations. And so that's what Cliff Kingsbury is going to steer into, which makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you want to have a quarterback out there comfortable in what they're doing, comfortable in what you're asking them to do as a play caller. So really no surprise there. But getting to those Marcus Mariota performances, look, 86.5 offensive grade from Pro Football Focus. And I know PFF grades are highly, highly debated. But the good thing about the quarterback position is you can essentially, look, the routes are what the routes are. You don't disguise routes, you know what I mean? Like as far as once they're in the tree, like from a grading retrospective performance, like a guy runs a post, it's a post, you know what I mean? It's not like he's going to run an outbreaking dig and then say, nope, that's actually a post route. It just looks like an outbreaking dig. No, like a post looks like a post, you know what I'm saying? So when it comes to grades and like decision-making, PFF, like they don't count, wide open receivers outside the quarterback's field of vision. They don't count those against them because you got to see it to be able to throw it, right? Following the progression, all that kind of stuff. So 86.5 overall grade from the Las Vegas Raiders game. Pretty solid grade, 90.3 passing grade, which is very, very good. And that's the kind of performance you're going to want from him against against Kansas City Chiefs. Managed the game really well in that one. 2 total touchdowns. Did have the fumble. Again, I kind of chalk it up to just a little bit of excitement. You know what I mean? I think it was the second run of the game. Big run. Just got a little bit greedy with it, ends up getting the ball knocked out. Week 4, obviously the Commanders lost to the Atlanta Falcons. Another strong performance from Marcus Mariota individually. 90.4 total offensive grade, 89.2 passing grade, which was knocked down due to the interception thrown in the game. So without that interception, and I know obviously with every quarterback, without interceptions, your grades are better. But just give you an idea, without the interception, his grade is well over 90. So he actually had a overall better performance functionally against the Atlanta Falcons, according to PFF. Did have the interception, though. Poor third down conversion rate, which has been a season-long problem for the Washington Commanders, 12.5% conversion rate in week 4. And then week 7 obviously was very disastrous, 37.4 overall grade, 30.8 passing grade, had the pick 6, just trying to make something happen for his team. It's one of those throws, that pick 6, where you want Marcus Mariota's kind of veteran savvy to really show up in that moment. It just didn't. What showed up was his veteran want to create something. You go back and watch that play, and Jeremy McNichols, who he's trying to hit in the flat on that kind of desperation heave on third down, is actually pretty open, early in the play, take the check down, those types of things in the third and short, not third and short because it was third and short, then a penalty made it third and medium. But still, take what you can get. And Jeremy has shown the ability to break tackles, push through tackles, fall forward, things like that. But that's all hindsight. That's stuff that Marcus Mariota saw on tape. We saw on tape. And so they're gonna talk about what changes from the Washington Commanders offense when Marcus Mariota is on the field compared to Jayden Daniels. Again, small sample size really for both quarterbacks, but Mariota's run grade is pretty solid. More north-south runs from Marcus Mariota than you get from Jayden Daniels. It's something we talked about the last time Mariota had a step in for Jayden, and it shows up on the tape as well. He's just a much more decisive runner in that he doesn't try to run around people or kind of run and decide, okay, am I going to pass? Am I going to try to? No, like when he decides to run, he puts a cleat in the dirt. He gets north and south, and he gets yards. And that's something that honestly I kind of wish that Jayden Daniels will learn from Marcus Mariota. But again, you can't expect one guy to copy paste another guy. Efficiency is pretty good. Week 3 was better. 71.4% completion percentage is really good. Week 4, 59% completion percentage. Obviously hampered by that interception. So, that's going to be a little bit problematic. And I think that's something that really changes with the Commanders' offense with Marcus Mariota is they use the left side and the middle of the field a little bit more than when Jayden is in there. Jayden is obviously more tilted towards the right side and then a little bit in the middle, but, more so the right side. And Marcus uses the rest of the field a little bit better. Play action is also really strong with Marcus Mariota, a 91.8 overall grade in play action. Washington is 5th highest in the league so far as far as using play action. So I think that's a big advantage or a big strategic possibility they can find an advantage against the Chiefs. Of course, one thing that makes play action work even better, right, is establishing a really good run game, which is something that we've talked about here on the show and something that we want to see the Washington Commanders try to do, not just with Bill, but get more Jeremy McNichols, get Chris Rodriguez back involved. The good things happen when they're using all 3 backs, I think. So you like to see that. Some tendencies to look for. Washington is number 1 in no huddle. 65% of the time they're running no huddle. Don't expect that to change much. Shotgun, pretty much 100% of the time, but it's actually 98% of the time. Those other ones are probably kneel downs. I don't know. There's not a lot that you see out of the Washington Commanders under center. Meanwhile, Kansas City is number 1 in using 7-man boxes 39% of the time. So expect some heavy boxes. High blitz rate. The Washington Commanders and the Kansas City Chiefs both blitzing about 30% of the time. So you're going to see a decent amount of blitzing on Monday night. And then especially with Marcus's significant drop. So he's got an 89.3 passing grade by PFF in clean pockets. And he's got a 67.7 grade when facing pressure. So the Kansas City Chiefs, they already like to blitz. Given that information and assuming that it shows up on tape, they're going to want to lean into that even more. Something that's going to help the Washington Commanders and Marcus Mariota significantly. Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel practicing this week. Both of them talking like they're going to play. I expect both of them to play. Of course, we're going to get final word on that Saturday afternoon. We may get a little bit more finality to that before Friday afternoon when Dan Quinn speaks with us after practice because he's kind of had that willingness to kind of give that information. The Chiefs also run 2 high coverage 62% of the time. So they blitz a lot up front, but they also keep a shell or like to keep a lid on the opposing offenses. So the Commanders have to be willing to extend some drives, which actually kind of helps because the longer you can keep Patrick Mahomes on the sideline, the longer you can, or the better things are for your defense. Cliff Kingsbury is hoping to quote unquote help open some things up with the returns of Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel. And Deebo says, quote, felt good, ready to rock out, end quote. Turnover is going to be a big deal. Third down, obviously going to be a big deal. The Chiefs are allowing about 40% third down conversions. So there is an opportunity here for 40%, I said. Hopefully I said 40%. So there is an opportunity here for the Washington Commanders to be better than their 35.5% season average. Did pretty well against the Dallas Cowboys, actually. So hopefully that trend will continue. But bottom line is Marcus Mariota certainly, even though he wasn't terrible, has to be better than he was against the Atlanta Falcons, against the Kansas City Chiefs. And while the offense hopes that the key or that the key returns at receiver help Marcus Mariota do just that, the defense has to execute a now pared down scheme to help impact the Kansas City Chiefs. Suddenly, once again, dynamic offensive attack. That and more coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by FanDuel. The NFL season is rolling right along, and FanDuel has an offer still that you don't want to miss. If you haven't taken advantage of it yet, you need to take advantage of it now, because new customers still, you bet just $5 and you'll get $300 in bonus bets if you win. You pick a bet, any bet. Doesn't have to be a Commanders bet, doesn't even have to be an NFL bet. You pick any bet, you put down $5. If it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use anywhere across the app. We just talked about Marcus Mariota and the uncertainty around the offense and performance, and are we going to have receivers back and all that kind of stuff. Well, if you think that Marcus Mariota is going to benefit from the returns of Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel, take a look at his over-under on his passing yards. Maybe you want to go take the over for that $5 first bet. Maybe you think Deebo Samuel is going to score a touchdown after missing last week. Same thing, build a same game parlay. Whatever it is, you can do it at FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders also brought to you in part by Rippling. And if you're a business owner, here's the truth. SaaS promised to make work easier, but now the average company is buried in hundreds of apps that just slow down your team. And they simply don't work together all that well. That's not SaaS, that's SAD, software as a disservice. That's why you need Rippling. Rippling is the unified platform for global HR, payroll, IT, and finance all in one place. And they've already helped millions of businesses replace a mess of disconnected tools with one system designed to give leaders clarity, speed, and control. Think about all the moving parts of an NFL team, not just the three phases, but you can just go there: offense, defense, special teams. You've also got the personnel offense, contracts, equipment managers, doctors, medical, all that kind of stuff. Trying to manage all of that with separate systems would just be chaotic. Well, Rippling does the same for your business, uniting all of those departments, everything from onboarding to payroll to IT access. It runs automatically and perfectly syncs your business. And right now you can get 6 months free when you go to rippling.com/LockedOnNFL. Learn more at rippling.com/LockedOnNFL. It's rippling.com/LockedOnNFL for 6 months free. Terms and conditions apply. Simply playing harder hasn't really helped the Washington Commanders defense, right? We've heard that message from the team for weeks now, is just go out there and play physical, play harder, do this, do that. So what the Washington Commanders coaches are doing, Dan Quinn, defensive coordinator Joe Whitt Jr. specifically, is they're simplifying, is one way of putting it. Paring down, I think, is the more accurate way of putting it. That's how Joe Whitt put it. Talked to some players in the locker room, and they kind of agree. It's not necessarily a simplification of their defense, but more so just kind of removing some of the layers, which is what Joe Whitt talked about. Maybe they're synonyms, maybe it's six of one, half a dozen of the other type of thing. Whatever it is, the hope is that fewer things to think about, fewer things to read, fewer things to react to will help this Washington Commanders defense just play smarter, more aware, and more importantly, more reliably against the Kansas City Chiefs offense, who has gotten Rashee Rice back and has gotten Xavier Worthy back, and they are clicking on all cylinders. In the 1 week we've seen with them, with all those weapons back against the Las Vegas Raiders. Again, Las Vegas Raiders defense, not exactly great. Max Crosby missed half that game, but still very good sample size from the Kansas City Chiefs, what you should expect on offense. So Dan Quinn, basically admitted that his team, specifically his defense, was quote unquote off course. Joe Whitt Jr. called the adjustment, paring down. The defense wanted to speed up the play. And basically just it comes from repeated breakdowns, right? There's just repeated situations where head coach Dan Quinn said they went back to the tape and they looked at it and they said, are we giving these guys too much? Is there a hesitation here, a hesitation there? Because they're trying to remember, all right, if this guy does this, if that guy does that, and if that guy does that, then here's what I do in real time. Meanwhile, the advantage that the offense has always had against defenses is knowledge. The offense knows what's about to come. The offense, like CeeDee Lamb, knows if he's about to run a post into the middle of the field or run a fly route in the middle of the field. up the seam. The defense doesn't know that. So the defense, and this is just ideally, and this is just from my perspective, if you're, say, a safety in this Washington Commanders defense, and you're reading this and saying, okay, if this slot receiver runs this type of a route, then I've got to do this. But if that tight end is leaking out, I've also got to watch this. And more importantly, if the quarterback rolls out here, then I've got to go this way. Then when that receiver who knows the one job that he has on that play is full speed running that job, the defender trying to cover him in the exact same amount of space is thinking about three different things at once. And it's just naturally going to kind of delay the processing and the ability to react. So the theory here is that the Washington Commanders will simplify that, pare it down, whatever you want to call it, and allow their defenders to play faster. Another adjustment that they're going to have to make is the fact that they just don't have any edge pass rushers right now as far as defensive ends. Dietrich Wise Jr. went down in week 2. Javonte Jean-Baptiste went down a couple weeks later. Now Dorrance Armstrong is out. Preston Smith is out there. Certainly they brought back Jalen Holmes, but to expect those two guys to do things at the level of a Dietrich Wise, at a level of a Dorrance Armstrong, I like to never say never type of thing, but both guys have been in the league long enough that you should kind of have an idea of who they are. Solid role players, solid for what they do, but not guys that you should expect to be sack leaders. So where's my ideas for what the Washington Commanders defense could do? How can they tweak their defense to kind of just represent who their personnel are? Well, I think when you look at it, you got your three best defensive linemen are now Daron Payne, Javon Kinlaw, and basically either Johnny Newton or Eddie Goldman, just kind of depending on the scenario. So if you got three really good defensive linemen, or at least solid defensive linemen, then it pretty much lends to the idea that you should be using odd front defenses. One down lineman, 3 down linemen, the rest of them linebackers and DBs. So formations like 2-4-5, right? So in a 2-4-5, if you hear the terminology 2-4-5 defense, the 2 means 2 down linemen. Doesn't necessarily mean there's only 2 guys lined up on the line of scrimmage. It just means there's only 2 guys with their hand in the dirt, a 3-point stance, if you were. 4, the middle number, and that whole thing, 2-4-5, that's the amount of linebackers. Again, they could be on the line of scrimmage. They could be off the line of scrimmage. They're linebackers, right? Kane Medrano, Jordan McGee, 2 guys that Joe Whitt Jr. mentioned getting more reps for here, specifically this week, but just in the future. And then the 5, the last number in a 2-4-5, that's the amount of defensive backs. They could be safeties, they could be corners. 5 is basically your nickel package, right? That's where the nickel package comes from, is the number 5. So you're typically talking 2 outside corners, a slot corner, and then 2 safeties. Sometimes one of those safeties, though, is like your Buffalo nickel or your star. Like every defense kind of calls it something different, but it's essentially your safety linebacker hybrid. And truthfully, Kane Medrano is kind of like that guy. So in theory, you have a look here where you've got 2 down defensive linemen, say Javon Kinlaw and Daron Payne are on the defensive line, hand in the dirt. Most likely both of them are playing 3-tech. And then you've got 4 linebackers who could be Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, Jordan McGee, and maybe Ale Cajo if he's active, right? And then those are your 4 linebackers, and you've got 5 defensive backs. But in that defensive back look, it's your 2 outside corners. So presumably Marshawn Lattimore and Trey Amos, unless one of them gets replaced. Mikey Sanders still in the slot. Quan Martin or Darnell Savage or Jeremy Reeves as kind of more traditional safety, and then maybe a Kane Medrano as a safety / linebacker hybrid, right? As your 5th defensive back. So we've seen the Washington Commanders use a 2-4-5 in some way, shape, or form 37% of the time. They've also used a 3-3-5 33% of the time. They've actually been very successful compared to the rest of the league when in a 3-man front. Something I asked Coach Whitt about on Friday, which is our typical Thursday, on Friday. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them do that a little bit more. They're 3rd highest in 1 high shell usage, worst success rate when they're single high safety. So wouldn't hate seeing them go more 2 high. Simplification would also help that. Or like simplifying is putting more people deep to keep a lid on opposing offenses, try to minimize some of those explosive passes. They've been vulnerable deep. They've been vulnerable on the left end, right end from a running game standpoint. So having more people in the middle of the defense kind of flow left and right would theoretically at least help with that kind of an effort as well. And as far as those coverage concerns with Bobby Wagner, if you've got other linebackers, other safety hybrids out there like that on the edges, it gives less likelihood that Bobby Wagner is going to be, covering a running back out in the flat, things like that. The Chiefs like to run heavy, 11 personnel, 52% of the time, 12 personnel, 35% of the time. So they like to have tight end or 2 on the field for the majority of the game. 82% of the time they're in shotgun, 60% of the time they use motion, and they have the second highest success rate in when they use motion, which again, one of the reasons that you need to simplify the defense, make the communication easier, faster, and hopefully you can combat that motion game from the Kansas City Chiefs. That's basically what simplification is all about. It's all about trying to make it so the defense can play faster and counter some of the creative things that the Chiefs do a little bit better. So Jordan McGee's going to get more playing time. Kane Medrano mentioned for more playing time as well. So those are some of the things that we're expecting to see again Monday night when the Washington Commanders face the Kansas City Chiefs. Fixing the defense is crucial. Marcus Mariota, clearly important, but fixing the defense is even more important because you're just not going to win track meets with a lot of these offenses week in, week out. But perhaps the single most important matchup for the Washington Commanders involves containing the Chiefs' arguably most unstoppable force today, defensive lineman Chris Jones. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by Mazda, and is brought to you by Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. And there are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, they move culture, they keep the game moving forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward has to be the coaches acknowledging the need for change, because just like players all kind of grew up being the top athletes on campus, coaches are the same. They work their way up from the lower ranks to the higher ranks, and all along the way, they're being told how effective they are, how smart they are. So some kudos to the defensive coaching staff for realizing that time has come. I know some of us out here realized that time had come earlier, but they got to the point when they got to the point, and we'll see how it works this weekend. Maybe relying too heavily on complex coverages and is leading to struggling against the run, and we'll be able to see some improvement there from the coaching staff actively taking a role in fixing it. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to every Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Chris Jones, defensive coordinator Joe Whitt Jr. called him, or offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury, I should say, called Chris Jones a game wrecker, and that is putting it lightly. Chris Jones not just going to play the interior defensive line, he's going to play all over. I would imagine every single offensive lineman is going to get at least one rep against Chris Jones on Monday night, and how the Washington Commanders handle him could determine Marcus Mariota's fate. Again, we talked about this. Marcus Mariota, significantly worse PFF grading, completion percentage, whatever metric you want to use, it's significantly worse under pressure than it is clean. And to a certain extent, there's a no duh there, right? But I mean significantly worse under pressure than when clean. And you saw the pick six last week. That's a duress play. That's a panic play. You don't want to see that kind of stuff. So it's going to be imperative that the Washington Commanders have a plan. Have multiple plans, really, when we talk to Cliff Kingsbury. And because of that, and because of one, get the run game going, expect to see plenty of six-man offensive line fronts, meaning eligible receiver, Trent Scott, someone like that, getting out there. You might see a little bit more of Andrew Wylie. You might see a little bit more of Nick Allegretti. I don't know, because they've got experience against Chris Jones. They've got all the knowledge. Spoke to both of those gentlemen and center Tyler Biadasz on Friday about Chris Jones, and spoke to Cliff Kingsbury about Chris Jones. And so here's some of the things that we got, right? So right now the Chiefs have 15 sacks as a team, which is right in the lower middle part of the pack. So not a lot, but the disruption has been significant from the Kansas City Chiefs. Chris Paul, left guard. If you look at Chris Jones and his alignment snaps where he lines up for the most part, Chris Paul is going to see Chris Jones more than anybody else. Now, Tyler Biadasz is probably going to be helping him out, right? I expect a lot of double teams, all those kinds of things. But Chris Paul coming off of one of his worst games of the season right now against the Dallas Cowboys. So that's a little bit concerning. Tyler Biadasz also got roughed up a little bit in that Cowboys game. I think everybody basically got roughed up a little bit in that Cowboys game. But you're going to need that Biadasz brain power. You're going to need that Chris Paul raw athleticism and physical ability to help contain Chris Jones. Sam Cosmi is also going to see a good amount of Chris Jones. He returned last week. 85.9 PFF pass pro grade is really good, but a 53.5 PFF run blocking grade, not as good. So you want to see that get a little bit better. He's going to need to handle Chris Jones's power. Again, you want to get the run game going. You're definitely more worried about Chris Jones as a pass rusher. But the thing about Chris Jones and the Kansas City Chiefs, and this is something that Andrew Wylie and Nick Allegretti pointed to quite a bit, is not just what he does by himself, but how they use him to manipulate things, right? The Chiefs use multiple defensive fronts, 4-2-5, 32% of the time, 4-3-4, 31% of the time, 3-3-5, 23% of the time. And Chris Jones will line up in a different spot in each of those different looks. He's very oftentimes 3-tech over the guards, 4-down looks. That means that, Paul and Cosme, like I said, are going to see him a lot. But Josh Connerly is also going to see him. If you look at the second most alignment reps for Chris Jones so far this season, it's actually left end, which is going up against your right tackle. So Josh Connerly is going to see him. That's where I expect Trent Scott to kind of come in and have an impact a little bit as well. Nick Allegretti told me, quote, Chris Jones is top 3, excels when he can get the offensive line to play outside their game. Tall, powerful guy, set firm, get your hands on him and fight. That is what you got to do when you play against Chris Jones. He highlights the need for Chris Paul, Sam Cosme, whoever it is, to be disciplined, trust your technique against Jones because he's going to bring you moves. He's going to bring a lot of power. Andrew Wylie, it's called Chris Jones a, quote, smart football player, more football intelligent. He has the freedom to make his decisions, change it up on him, end quote. Both guys talked about how cerebral Chris Jones is. Doesn't really get a lot of credit for that, but he is very, very cerebral as a player. Will set you up to take the fall. No vertical sets. No vertical sets against Chris Jones. I was told by one of these guys, if you let Chris Jones get 3 steps on you, you're done. You are done. No vertical sets against Chris Jones. Why does that matter? The opposing team knows that too. So they know if you got Chris Jones lined up against you, you don't want to take a vertical set so they can manipulate that against you. Tyler Biotish said that you got to use experience, you got to use film. Quote, respecting the player's ability, but also doing the job is what, end quote, is what is going to come up to. And then Andrew Wylie also pointed out, look, they've got other guys, George Karlaftis, Mike Dana. There's going to be situations. And look, if it comes up with like a sack or something, like the Monday Night broadcast is going to say, I can't believe they left Chris Jones one-on-one. Fans are going to say, I can't believe you left Chris Jones one-on-one. But the way that defensive lines play, the way that they have the ability to influence as well, Andrew Wylie pointed out, there's going to be times where you just got to, I'm going to insert a different word than he said, man up and go block. And you know what? I like that attitude because that's the attitude I've been kind of looking for from the Washington Commanders all along. So it's a little bit of our look at the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll have our final game plan episode coming up on the next episode, dropping Sunday night into Monday morning. Once I get to Kansas City and get settled, I'll lay that down and we'll put that out all ahead of Monday Night Football. Washington Commanders at Kansas City Chiefs. That's going to do it for today's episode. If you want to come through for the next mailbag episode, if you want to get inside information from me, or if you just want to communicate directly with me outside the show via text message, all you got to do is go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an insider today. For your second listen of the day, head over to Locked On NFL. Find out what the national media is thinking about not just Washington, but the entire NFL landscape. Locked On NFL every single day, twice a day, Monday through Friday on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. To the everydayers, I see you and I appreciate you every day. But I thank you again specifically for coming through yet again today. Until next time, stay safe, be kind to one another. We'll talk again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.